And at any rate, I think it's kind of a let the buyer beware sort of situation because there are coaches who are trauma informed, trauma conscious, who do outstanding work with very safe and excellent results. And unfortunately, some of my former mental health colleagues who have a license to diagnose and treat mental disorders, including the effects of trauma, may not be as skilled. So, what I recommend to people is to look for someone who is a genuine expert. And that means an extensive amount of training. Hey, Rhonda, glad to see you here. Thank you for letting me know that my settings were incorrect with respect to the microphone. I would hate to go on for 30 minutes and not have anyone be able to hear me. I think the amount of experience that it requires to actually be an expert or a specialist in dealing with trauma is far more than most people who are doing the work have. I came to a point, even though I had been a licensed psychotherapist and a board certified diplomat in my field, which only like 5% of my peers had, I still did not feel 100% comfortable treating severely traumatized people because the potential to do harm is so great. That's why Nicole Lewis-Keeber is my person who I turn to when I need to consult with someone or refer to someone, and why she called her program Do No Harm. I think it's unfortunate that there are so many well-meaning people who have taken it upon themselves to do this kind of work and get training and maybe even certifications, and the potential to do harm is still so great. It's really unfortunate. That being said, there's a whole lot of good work being done by bartenders, massage therapists, and hairdressers. And I have always said this, there's no guarantee that if you go to a therapist, you're going to get a better person than if you went to a coach. And sometimes the very best healing you get is from your sister or your neighbor or someone in your church. So if someone calls themselves an expert or a specialist, do your due diligence. Do your due diligence. Something I learned from Nicole Lewis-Keeber, and now that I know it, it makes complete sense, is that a lot of people with a trauma history, yes, and nail technicians too, absolutely. A lot of people with trauma in their history go on to become entrepreneurs. Now, when I first learned this, I thought, why would that be? But let me unpack it for a minute because it makes so much sense. First of all, many people become solopreneurs because they lost their job. They got laid off, they got fired, their position was eliminated, or they were told the euphemist, we're moving in another direction. That's so confusing. If you lose your job and you happen to be a woman of a certain age, let's just say over 50, you are extremely unlikely to find another job in your industry. And that is because of the combined effects or the intersection of sexism and ageism. So if you're a woman over 50 and you lose your job because it's made redundant, you're laid off, or you get fired for some reason, it's very likely that you will become a solopreneur if you need to and want to continue working. I call these folks my encore entrepreneurs because their business is an encore to a successful career that they've always had. So you may start your own business because of a health emergency. You may have a acute incident that takes you out of the workplace for a while. And when it's time to go back to work, you can't go back to the career that you had. It no longer fits with the lifestyle you have now. You may have a chronic illness. Many of my solopreneur friends have a chronic illness. I have been living with chronic pain for over 30 years. So I structure my workday so that I can have a nap in the middle of the day because I don't sleep well at night because of chronic pain. I couldn't do that if I was working for someone else. And a lot of my fellow solopreneur friends have chronic illnesses. So I think knowing that you could begin your entrepreneurial journey as a result of an accident, illness, it could be an accident or illness involving a family member or even a beloved pet that you now do not want to be separated from for many hours of the day. So you choose to start your own business, usually an online business. I have one of my dogs right next to me right now, and he is at the end of his life. And this is a privilege because I work from home. Is it trauma? Is it traumatic? Is it traumatizing? Yes. One of the people who follow me on social media interacted with a post that I released this week regarding this topic. And specifically, her comment was related to the fact that my guest on the episode, Nicole Lewis-Keeber, was referring to the nomenclature of trauma around big T and little t. So this individual had a comment about that and did not feel that that was appropriate. Now, this is not my this is my expert who is sharing this information. Do I find it helpful? Yes, I do. Do I find it has limitations? Yes, and let me explain why. Because when you say trauma, that means so many different things to so many different people. What is traumatizing to one person may not be what is traumatizing to someone else. So just using the T word and expecting everybody to be on the same page, absolutely impossible. So the framework that Nicole was sharing was, and many people use this, many professionals use this. Big T for really significant traumas, loss of a loved one, divorce, you know, war, rape, really significant. And then little t can encompass so many other things. And it's related to the ACEs scale, right? The adverse childhood event scale. But this individual's comment and challenge to me, I think is well spoken because what's a big T to someone else may be a little t to you. And your little t trauma may be extremely disruptive and cause tremendous impairment. So I think that was a really useful comment. Now, other than losing your job or having an accident or illness of yourself or a loved one be the reason that you are catapulted into entrepreneurship, there are other ties between trauma and entrepreneurship that predispose someone to become an entrepreneur. Let's take my friends with ADHD, for example. I have ADHD. I was not diagnosed in childhood. Many women are being diagnosed later in life. The fastest growing group of people being diagnosed with ADHD are women over 40. And always feeling like you're out of step with other people, not being able to do things the way you're told to do them, having difficulty sitting still, paying attention, following through, remembering, being organized, the classic symptoms of ADHD, impulsivity, distractibility, procrastination, all of these things create a lot of what we might call little t trauma throughout childhood. Because if you can't sit still and keep your mouth shut, you are going to get negative feedback. And if you don't do your homework, negative feedback, or you do it and you forget to bring it, negative feedback. Or if you impulsively speak out of turn in class, even if you have the right answer, negative feedback. So a lot of people with ADHD are very smart, very creative, and very original thinkers who got a tremendous amount of negative feedback throughout their childhood that they were lazy, crazy, stupid, you know, obstinate, insubordinate, a problem child. Even people who are gifted can have traumatizing experiences in childhood because they think quicker, they learn quicker, they demand more of their teachers. They can be perceived as a problem, a burden, right? Um, Kids who have witnessed domestic violence, kids who've experienced child abuse of any kind, physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, are going to carry that with them into adulthood. Anyone who's experienced the loss of a parent through their parent's divorce or the death of a parent, incarceration of a parent, parents with drug or alcohol problems. And they're so moving. If you had a family that moved a lot because of the career path of one or both parents, that is traumatizing. Now, why would those people, and I've just named a few groups, really literally any child who feels different in any way is more likely to become an entrepreneur in the future. And any child who's experienced some of the traumas that I've talked about is more likely to become an entrepreneur in the future. But why would that be? Well, Nicole is more of an expert on this than I am. But what makes sense to me in my own personal experience and that of the hundreds of female solopreneurs that I have coached over the last few years is when you know you're different and you know you think differently and you know you need to do things differently, you're not going to fit very well in a corporate environment. You're not going to fit very well in a nonprofit environment. You're definitely not going to fit well in an academic environment. So, whether you feel that entrepreneurship is a choice or a necessity, how you get there can oftentimes be the result of all those accumulated traumas. I can recall for myself, I was always very eager to learn. And I always had what I now understand are disruptive ideas. It did not make sense to me in any workplace I was ever in that I needed to go to meetings that lasted far longer than anyone's attention span, including the person who was holding the meeting, where the same things were discussed again and again and again and again, but no decisions were made. There was no outcome, oftentimes no agenda. You went to meetings because you went to meetings. And that made 0 sense to me. Why are we talking about the same thing, knowing we're not gonna move the game piece along because we didn't the last 5 times well, if you share that opinion, you're not gonna be very popular. You are not going to be you're gonna be a management problem, and you will be not considered promotable, even if you are more creative, more hardworking, more talented, and put more effort in than your peers because original ideas and out of the box thinking is not generally welcomed in most workplaces. It disrupts things. Now, in creative fields, that's different, right? But in most occupations that you or I have been in, not welcome. In fact, I remember a number of times being told that I was not a team player, and I found that extremely hurtful. But what I learned was not being a team player means that I don't say and do the things that other people say and do. I'm like, well, things don't get better unless someone is doing things differently. And you're absolutely right, Rhonda. Yes, when you have a mentor that says, "I can't take you to meetings because you ask all the hard questions." Let me speak to this because my typical experience in meetings in corporate, nonprofit, and academic careers before I started working for myself is, I had questions. I kinda got booted out of the church for the same reason. Like, I had questions. I was not trying to be disrespectful. I was not trying to be oppositional. I was not trying to challenge anyone's authority, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But that's how it was perceived. I'm a curious person. I have a fast moving brain. I think differently. So the status quo doesn't make sense to me. So I question it, not for the sake of questioning it, for the sake of making things better, which I used to think every business wanted. I don't believe that anymore. I think most businesses, and frankly, most humans, want to maintain the status quo because it's comfortable and it passes for security. I don't think it actually is security. In fact, I think the ultimate job security is self employment because someone can always fire you. They can always eliminate your position. They can always cut your pay, cut your hours. I would much rather be in charge of my own financial security because I know what I'm capable of. And now that I don't have a boss, I don't have anyone telling me no. Now, that's not to say everything I do is right. I have had some epic fails in my own business, some really cringeworthy and frankly heartbreaking failures, but I own them. There's nobody who shares that but me. Um, on the topic of meetings and questions, the thing that used to bug me the most about meetings is that typically I can't just sit still and go into coma mode and not think. The only way I could keep myself alert in a meeting is by thinking. And if that thinking led to questions, I would ask them. And sometimes there's that we're not addressing that here, or what they would just ignore, whatever. But later, and sometimes it wasn't a question, sometimes it was commentary. I would give feedback on something. Inevitably, almost 100% of the time, after we'd left the room, and the other people had left, one or more people would pull me aside and said, "That was so good. I absolutely agree with you. So glad you said that. So glad you asked that. So glad you brought that up." And at first I thought, "Oh, good. Well, maybe I'm not the only one who thinks this way." But after a few years of that, I thought, "Fuck you. Don't tell me this in the hallway after the fact. If you agree, if you are like-minded, say it in that room where it counts. Don't just let me look like, you know, a troublemaker who's kind of standing out there all by myself." Which is another reason why people go into entrepreneurship because their original thinking is not welcomed elsewhere in the workplace. It's just not. And here's the thing, you may have surrounded yourself with other entrepreneurs at this point in your life. I mean, most of the people I know are entrepreneurs for the last few years. These are my people. They think like I do, and I think they're interesting and exciting and fun. And I love my tribe. I really do. I'm finding the longer I'm self-employed, it's now been 12 years, the harder it is for me to relate to other people. And for the record, I don't think I'm better than them. I don't think I'm smarter than them. I don't think I'm braver than them. I don't feel superior to people who choose to have a corporate, nonprofit, or academic career. I just feel that we have different needs, different preferences, different priorities, and different goals. I respect their path, and I want my path to be respected. But if you have surrounded yourself with primarily other solopreneurs, you may not be aware that we're actually pretty rare. We're actually pretty rare. The number of people who choose to break away from the conventional norm of entrusting your 8 hours a day, your benefits, and your financial security on others, they're the majority. They are the far and above majority. We're the weirdos. We're the outsiders. We are the outliers and to some degree the misfits. And sometimes I forget that because I surround myself with other solopreneurs. But most people don't choose this path and won't choose this path. By the very same token, when I decided to jump out of an airplane with two of my kids to celebrate a milestone birthday, most people told me they think I'm absolutely insane and they would never do that. That's okay. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to be excited for me that I'm doing this. So, whether you became a solopreneur because you got pushed out, you got you aged out, you left because you or someone you care for has a chronic or acute illness or an accident, you relocated, you are in a youth dominated industry and you are no longer considered youthful, or you simply recognized that you needed more creativity, more flexibility, more freedom, and you were willing to make the commitment to signing your own checks. I promise you, whether you had an abusive childhood like I did, or you simply experienced, and I want to say simply meaning that it's less because it's not. All trauma, all feelings, all lived experience is relevant and equal. But you may have felt traumatized throughout your whole previous career because you never fit in, because you never understood why everyone around you was deliriously happy with the whole thing, and you could not wait for Friday to come. You're different. And simply being different than others can be a bit traumatizing until you adjust to the idea, accept the idea, embrace the idea, and stop looking to people who will never understand you to give you their approval. Give it to yourself and carry on your merry way. Now, if you are having trouble with people, I want to wrap this up today with just talking about a couple of problematic places where the trauma history may be showing up in your current business. And you might want to go beyond listening to a podcast or watching a live stream and actually address it. Some of the ways that trauma shows up in entrepreneurship, I've been talking about a lot, which is how we got here. Being different, being pushed out, fired, and so forth. Or you just can't tolerate boredom, so you just keep leaving, right? That was me. I could only stay in a job every couple of years because it just got too freaking boring, and so I left. Um, but if you came into entrepreneurship with trauma in your history, for however short or long that's the case, some of the ways that you may recognize that it's still a concern is how you deal with people. Nicole helped me understand that a lot of people become entrepreneurs because of trust issues, control issues, and issues with authority figures. Meaning, if you had an abusive childhood, you don't feel safe relying on other people. You do not want other people telling you what to do. You need to be, the captain of your own ship. So you become a solopreneur. That's a very clear through line. Childhood trauma led to your decision to become your own boss because you never wanted to bend the knee to anyone else. I'm often using Game of Thrones references because I freaking loved that series. You don't want to bend the knee. You want to be your own boss. Even if that means you work twice as much and earn half as much, you are not going to let anyone have control or power over you, how you work, where you work, with whom you work, what you charge, what hours you keep. That may have roots in trauma. Now, that doesn't have to be problematic. That doesn't have to stand in your way. It's just a good thing to know and understand. Because in situations in your business where you feel out of control, where you do have to trust others, those may be triggering. Those may be triggering. The other clue is if you have a lot of difficulty with other people that are clients or team members. Some solopreneurs with a trauma history go through a lot of people. In fact, they refuse to have long term relationships. They don't want to have employees. They don't even want to have long term contractors. So they only hire people by the gig and they always hire different people. Chances are that's trauma related because that's trust and control. It's not wanting to become dependent on anyone, right? I'm not shaming, blaming, or judging. Trust me, I'm not. I'm just holding up a mirror and a flashlight and saying, if this is you and it's problematic, because actually constantly hiring new people and constantly dealing with turnover, it absolutely slows your business growth. It's time consuming. Just like you've heard it said, it's easier to keep a client than to find a new one. It's absolutely easier to work with the same people over time than keep finding new ones. But if you have trust issues and control issues based on childhood trauma, that may be really difficult for you to do. If you have a history of trauma, you might find the way you set up your services, the kind of services that you offer, and the kind of relationships that you are able and willing to have with clients or customers may be impacted by that trauma. For example, I've heard people say, I don't want to have any client contact. I don't want to deal with humans at all. I just want to create digital products and buy ads and just put them in front of as many people as possible and then just let the money roll into my account. I'll hire someone to do my social media. I'll hire someone to do my Facebook and Instagram ads. I'll create the content, but I don't want to deal with people. That's trauma, my friend. That's trauma. Now, you may be at a point where you just really want to have passive income and you want to focus on other things. You want to hang out with your dogs. You want to travel. You want to live the nomadic life. You want to live the tiny house life, the van life. And you can't really be tied down to client related work. That's fine. If it feels like a choice based on your circumstances and your lifestyle and your preferences, there's no problem. But if you find yourself saying, I'm not doing that and I refuse to do that, and oh, hell no, am I going to do any of that? There's probably trauma. Now, here's the thing, you're the boss. You are the boss, right? You are the boss of your business. You are the boss of your life. You don't have to do anything you don't want, which is the beauty of this arrangement, right? It's one of the main reasons why we decide to do this. But if you've come to recognize in some small way because of watching this live stream or listening to the podcast or visiting Nicole Lewis-Keeber's website, reading her book, or following her on any of the socials, she's very active, including TikTok. And through that, you become aware, you know what? This makes sense. There's actually a lot I didn't really connect the dots. I'm realizing now that the things that happened to me 20, 30, 40 years ago are still happening to me today. And I just thought I could run away from them and set up a business where no one could boss me around, no one could tell me what to do, and I could have total control. But I realized that it's still getting in my way. Definitely connect with Nicole. She is a lovely person. Connect with her in some way. Maybe just start by following her on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, or, she's got a lot of really cool content. You might start by reading her book, How to Love Your Business. In fact, maybe your very next step, your very first next step is to go back. I think it's episode 64 of the Driven Woman podcast, and listen to my interview with Nicole. It's our first interview. I believe it's in June of 2021. Go listen to that, because this is not something that just hits you over the head one day. It's like an awareness, like watching the sun rise. And I think at some point, even if you've been dealing with something for a really long time, there comes a point where you're like, life doesn't have to be this hard. My business doesn't have to be this hard. Maybe it's time to lighten my load. If this is that time, I encourage you to take that step. Okay? I hope this has been helpful. Rhonda, you are so delightful for staying with me all the way to the end. I love you so much. Great comments, great questions. And this will be shared on my YouTube channel. And if you want to talk more about trauma and entrepreneurship, hit me up. I'm here for it. Okay, whether you're here live or watching on the replay, thank you for staying with me. I know this was a challenging topic, but it's too important not to talk about. Okay, bye for now.